Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network. Me and Dallas King make our way through the A24 filmography, look at their TV output, and bring you interviews with the people involved in front of and behind the camera. In this episode, I'm joined by author Maureen Foster to dive into the making of Under the Skin, which, as listeners to this show will know, is our favourite A24 film to date. Maureen is the author of a book called Alien in the Mirror, Scarlett Johansson, Jonathan Glazer, and Under the Skin. This is the first book to be written about the film, revisiting the film scene by scene through all its cinematic elements, and it features extensive interviews detailing the challenges the filmmakers faced, from hidden filming on the streets of Glasgow here in Scotland to defying blizzards in the Highlands. And Maureen explores Michel Faber's original novel. Thanks to Maureen for joining me, and be sure to buy her book from all good bookstores, who, if they don't have it, will order it in for you and is also available online. If you're a fan of Under the Skin like me, it really is essential reading. Enjoy the show. Maureen, for those kind of tuning in for the first time and might not be familiar with you, can you tell our audience a little bit about you and your background?
Okay, so I started writing, I guess after college, I started writing film reviews for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, as it was called then. I loved writing. I always loved movies. I loved writing about film. And I actually became a novelist. I wrote novels, and then I've written poetry. So the film review phase was fairly brief for me. I think partly because I wasn't comfortable critiquing. I was more of an appreciator than a critic. So I kind of got out of that. But I always wanted, once I started writing the novels and so on, long form, I always wanted to write one long work about one film. It was kind of a dream. And it was something in the back of my mind. And the years went by. And when I saw this film, it was the one. It was the one. There was so much going on in the film. I went back to the theater, so many times, and I knew this was the one that I would write about. And it just had that kind of, it affected me emotionally, and also it had such complexity. So this was the one I decided to do my long book on.
And that film that we're discussing today is one that anyone that listens to our podcast from, I think we talked about this movie all the way back in episode 3 and episode 100, and we still confirm it as our favorite of the 100-odd films under the A24 banner, and that's Under the Skin. And your book is called Alien in the Mirror, Scarlett Johansson, Jonathan Glazer, and Under the Skin. So before we dive into our book, where did the journey with the film and the book begin for you?
Okay, so I started taking notes in the theater. I think the third time I went to the theater, and I compiled. I had these notebooks full of reactions to shots and scenes and all of that. And then after about 3 months after the film's release, 3 or 4 months, I started to sit down to just write. And I came up. I guess I got to maybe 90 or 100 pages just. That ended up being the first section of the book, which is like a tour of the narrative. And when I got to that point, I decided maybe I could start showing it to publishers and see what they would think. And what I had in mind was a short book, like those BFI classic, those little, I had that in mind. That's 90 pages or something. But they, I pitched it to BFI. They said, well, the film is too recent, call us again in 5 years and so on. So I ended up then writing to all kinds of publishers. And the publisher that really liked the idea was McFarland, that I went with. And they said, well, we would love to publish this, but we're going to need, whatever it was, 80, 90,000 words. And I thought, well, I didn't have that in mind, but I guess now I will, in addition to what I was planning to write, which is part 1, I'll do now the making of the film and various other things. So the project grew from 25,000 words to, I think I ended up with about 90 or 100,000. So it grew because McFarlane said, we want you to do a real book length work. So yeah, and I went with McFarlane, and then for the next 3 years, I worked on the research and all the rest of the aspects.
Going back to that kind of first screening before that third one where it got under your skin,
Yeah.
part of the
Very
fun.
good.
What was your expectations going into that film? Even hearing that you'd sort of seen it 3 times, I've been lucky enough to see it in a cinema as well, but it had such a
Yep.
limited release. Really, it seemed to be one of those films that kind of dropped into cinemas and then kind of word of mouth kind of followed after. What was your first experience of the film kind of going in?
Well, I saw they had that wonderful poster, the Neil Keller House poster, outside my local theater for, I don't know, a couple of months. And I was so eager to see the film by the time it opened. But from the poster, I couldn't really tell what the film was. I hadn't read the book and I wasn't planning to, but it looked like it might be some sort of a mystical love story or something supernatural. I wasn't really sure, but I was very interested in it. And I didn't know anything else about it. But just before it opened, I was talking to somebody at a party, and he said, oh, I just saw Under the Skin in New York, and Scarlett Johansson plays an alien. And I was so upset because I like to see things cold, and I thought, I didn't even want to know that. But so I did know that going in, but that's all I knew. That's all I knew. She was an alien. I didn't know anything else. And so when I went in, I had no expectations. I mean, I had seen Glazer's other movies. I liked them a lot, but I was not at all prepared for just sort of how the film was so much a sensory experience and so little a cerebral one. I mean, and which is kind of like my favorite kind of film anyway. So you're trying to figure it out, but by the second time I saw it, I was more interested in letting it wash over me, for the second and third viewings. And then after that, I went back to more trying to figure out what was going on and what the things meant. So I was kind of going back and forth between the sensory experience and the, what's happening here? What is she doing? Where are these people from? The analysis.
Obviously, it's an adapted from a book. Did you feel compelled to go to your immediate Barnes and Noble and grab the book, or was that very much when you got this kind of remit that we want more than just a review of the kind of the film, we want the whole history? Was that when you read the book for the first time, or was it like in between that second and third screening, for example?
It was what you said about it was later. So once I was tasked with the full book, I realized immediately that one of my chapters would be solely devoted to Faber's novel. And so it was at that stage that I read the book. And so different from the film in so many ways, and yet distills that journey of this one character, which is really all that Glazer was carried about. So he dispensed with all the rest. Have you read the book?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Okay, so you know that he took the one thing that he cared about most, which was her journey, and he left behind a lot of what's in the book, which I actually also really like a lot. But that's at that point I read the book, and I loved it. I think it's wonderful,
So obviously the film came out like 2013. You
Yeah.
get kind of the thumbs up, we want you to write this book. How long was what was your expected kind of time that you were going to spend on this project? And obviously they kind of told you, we want sort of the making of the book, the film. What were your sort of aims and ambitions within kind of that of, this is the book I want to kind of make? How was that kind of early stages of development?
So I had what turned out to be part one by the time I signed on with McFarlane. And I said to the editor, could you send me some McFarlane film books so I can see what you're looking for, what kind of book length projects you have on films. And he said, Maureen, this is your book. We want you to do whatever you want. We're not sending you a thing. That's, it was both liberating and terrifying. But it was from that point that I really thought of all the things. I mean, I wanted to do the making of in all its aspects. I wanted to interview as many people as I could. I wanted to do the book. I knew I wanted to also devote a chapter to Jonathan Glazer and his career, and to Scarlett Johansson and her career. So I started an outline from that point of all the things I wanted to cover, and it ended up being the structure you see in the book today.
As a writer, what's your kind of research process? Because this is an interesting kind of film in the respect of, we think of films that come out, whether it's, say, something like Scarlett Johansson's other movies, Marvel, there's so much content about how they're made, the production, there's thousands of names. Under the Skin feels like an anomaly still. Up until your book kind of came along, it felt like it's a film people love, but there's not many kind of books about it or articles or huge, things with Jonathan Glazer telling you thousands of things about how the film was all kind of made. It's like something where the material that's available to fans, maybe an author, is relatively limited in the grand scheme of things. What was your kind of research process kind of going to be like for getting all this kind of information?
So I went to the production credits and made long lists of everyone who worked on the book, and including also producers, executive producers, people who financed the book, like Silver Reel. In fact, Claudia Blumhuber at Silver Reel was my first phone interview. I was very nervous. And so I had these lists, and I interviewed everyone who was willing to talk to me. And then I would transcribe the interviews. And then I made this giant chart of all aspects of the film. And then I would sort of overlap the parts of the interview that went with the different parts of the film. Like, oh, here this person is talking about how it was the unit manager who was talking about how Scarlett was learning to drive on the right other side of the road in that car, towing the generator in the back and driving like a mad woman, and all these anecdotes. So I would break the interviews down into anecdotes that went in all different parts of the book. So that's kind of like it was a mosaic. It was a lot of fun.
Was it a challenge as well? Because it's one of those things, like, in a way we've not attempted it on any sort of scale, but as I mentioned, it's one of our favorite films, and we've had Adam Pearson on before. But the cast is made up of so many unknowns, people off the street, people that have no social media credits, anything like that to reach out to, that played kind of key roles in this sort of candid kind of camera, kind of starring roles. Was it a challenge with a film like this to find everyone that was perhaps in front of the screen? Obviously, it was a bit more easier kind of behind the scenes potentially.
Yes, it was a challenge, no question. I did try to reach as many of those actors as I could through agencies, through the casting person on the film. And I wasn't able to reach a lot of them, but I did find interviews with some of them that were already, thank heaven for the internet, you find these things. And so I was able to get a little bit of a glimpse into their experiences from the interviews that were already out there. And then I was very lucky that so many of the people who worked on the film didn't want to talk about it. And what was so impressive was how many people I interviewed felt it was the most amazing experience they had in their whole careers. I mean, I heard that over and over again. I'll never forget this film. I had this experience. I wasn't expecting this. It was something else altogether. And so people had a lot of enthusiasm, and they were also candid, about how at times they were scared because there was a blizzard in the forest and there were these things going on, or they might get discovered. They were trying to shoot on the street guerrilla filmmaking. They were shooting covert filmmaking, and they were afraid they would be discovered. People would recognize them, and a whole crowd of people would come around and ruin the whole day. Mm-hmm. So everybody had an adventure. It was not a predictable experience for anyone who worked on it. We'll put it that way.
One of the reasons I love Under the Skin is the ambiguity. It's the lack of answers and how mysterious it is. For you, was that something that had you excited to uncover the mysteries of this film? Or was it a potential fear that this film might lose what could make it special when setting out something like how the film goes, what people were thinking behind the scenes, what something means? Was that a worry for you, or did you feel this is something I want to bring to life?
That's a really great question, because sometimes I see a film and I don't want to read too much about it. I don't want to know. But my experience of the film was so rich that I didn't think anything could hamper. It could puncture what my unique experience of it was watching it. So I wasn't concerned about that. And it became a separate thing. How the film was made became something separate from the experience I had and still have when I put the film on. The way I enter that world, and that's inviolate. Nothing will ever change that. Even though I know that the actor under the water was wearing a suit that made the bubbles go, all of that. Even though I know all of that, I never think about it when I watch the movie. The experience is perfect. So.
You touched on it as well. In addition to sort of diving into the film and the book, you explore the journey of Jonathan Glazer to adapting Under the Skin. What surprised you as you explored his creative arc? He is one of our most revered filmmakers here in the UK, but with only 3 films so far, features kind of released, and there was a huge 10-year gap, obviously, between the two as well. Yeah. What did you sort of discover about his hero's journey almost into making this film, and why he was the right person at the right time for this film?
The journey struck me as beautiful because clearly he had such a connection to the book and to the character when he read it. And he did go on a journey. Their first script was almost exactly based on the book. Mm-hmm. And then they moved on to another script that was a little farther away. And over the years, he was working. In the first few years of it, he was actually working on Birth. He had just finished Sexy Beast at the time they optioned Under the Skin. He was working on Birth up until when it was released in 2004. So even while he was working on Birth, he already had Under the Skin. It was already, in the works. Mm-hmm. And I think the most interesting thing is his journey from being having a script that was a filming of the book, which he realized he didn't want to do, to what it eventually became, which was his other vision of the character, just her own journey. And that part of the journey is most fascinating to me, because not only did they end up with a shooting script by 2011 that was very, very different from the book, but they even changed the script during the shooting they didn't really use a lot of the script. Mm-hmm. So there was then another permutation. Because they decided to do things while they were shooting that they hadn't planned on. And also Scarlett Johansson talks about how they would be in a scene, for example, the scene in the car with Adam Pearson, they would start to say the dialogue and Glazer would say, no, forget, I don't like the way I'm hearing. Forget the dialogue. I want you to just say what you think, improvise. And so even though the script had come through so many changes, they ended up even making so many changes after that. And that's where the magic is. That's the film you see, is the things that happened during shooting, because of the freedom he gave them, and
we had Adam on the show, he mentioned like, oh, you've got beautiful hands came from something that his mother would say to him, and that was something
Oh,
that
that's
he brought to
great.
the
Yes.
script. It was so it's fascinating to hear kind of about that improvisation. And obviously there was that sort of 10-year kind of wait in the development of
Yeah.
all the kind of scripts. Was that something that you wish you could have had access to, were these original scripts? I know they have interviews where they talk about, like, I saw one with Scarlett where she was like, oh, originally it was this two-hander, it was me and another alien within the
Yes.
community. And then over time that evolved. Did you ever get the chance to look at any of these scripts, or was it very much just part of your research?
I did get a chance.
Oh,
The
that's
one I
amazing. That
didn't
must be the
see,
holy grail.
yes, it's wonderful. I didn't see the very first script, which is the one that is based most closely, is aligned with the book. But the screenwriter does. He hasn't. There's an interview that I read with him where he talked about that was his. I mean, that was basically what he was tasked with, adapting the book as it was. I didn't read that one, but I did read a 2008 version of the script, which is here at the Margaret Herrick Library. It's part of the Academy. So I was very grateful to see that one. So that's about a little more than halfway through the journey, the 2008 script. And that one, that script still has so much in it that they later took out. At that stage, there were people in the community. There was an alien couple to begin with, which I think you may know was to be Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
And Scarlett Johansson. It was an alien couple. They move into a house, they make friends, they're farmers, and it was the whole community of people. And there were all these characters. And so that all fell away between 2008 and the shooting script of 2011. That all falls away because that was the script. The 2008 script is the one they tried to get budget for. And it had been budgeted for something like, in dollars, 43 million, and they could not raise it. So that was the turning point. That it could not be raised, and that was when it was decided that, it was put to him, can you re-envision the script, a much pared down version that we can actually get the budget for, and so that was when he arrived at focusing on just her arc. All the rest of the characters fell away, the community and so on. And then they got it down to something that could be made for about $11 million. And that's when they were able to pull together the financing from Silver Reel, Film 4, and Creative Scotland, and so on. But it was the Film 4 producer, and her name is escaping me now, so I'm going to look it up for you. She was the producer at Film 4 at the time, who was one of their financiers, who sat him down one wintry night after they couldn't get the financing, and said, can you reimagine it in another way so that we can raise the money?
One of the key things from as you kind of talk there and sort of your book is, as you kind of read through these scripts and the development of the film, sort of the key message I always took away, even I could imagine it when I was watching it, seems to be just strip things down. I mean, there's a part, for example, in the book where you discuss the meeting with the nervous man, and 3 pages of dialogue is stripped away down to a single glance. And there's many more kind of examples of that. Is that one of those things, like having kind of read those original scripts, the book, and seeing the finished product, do you think that was the best route to go down, was the less is more route?
Oh, to me, that's one of the key elements of the magic of the movie, the less is more. And it also happens to be my favorite kind of film. So I like to be the one to do the work. I don't want the director to, I don't want to be spoon-fed or hit over the head. And so the less is more, definitely. And the way things, that was part of the beauty of reading the book too. The way I could see that he took a whole investigation or a whole scene or a whole series of scenes in the book and would put them down to an image or a line. And another example I'm thinking of is the fur coat that Scarlett Johansson wears. In the book, the aliens are actually animals. They're kind of wolf-like. And what they have to do to her to make her human-like is they have to shave her body and they have to surgically alter her so she can be upright as opposed to walking on all fours. It's very painful, but they recreated her as human-like. But Glazer captures it with the fur coat, I mean, that she wears, and just little things like that you won't even think about, but that are little trappings in the film. And then scenes also with some of she picks up the hitchhikers that she picks up in the book, their conversations, the things they might say to her. There are little tiny things once in a while. And that's the process of Glazer's that most fascinates me, that he could it was like the book and all these things in the book were put in the back of his mind, and every once in a while, and Walter Campbell also, they wrote the script together, the shooting script. So both of them, coming up with these things. Although Campbell's version did not have anything to do with the book. He was going with something else.
As you kind of watch the film and you're drawing meaning and interpretation from the work that's in front of you, can it be difficult to break free knowing there's deleted dialogue, scripts, like versions 2 and 3 that you've read that might inform what you're thinking when you see a finished product potentially? Does that sway your viewpoint when the reality is on screen? Or do you have to just pretend like those scripts never existed, the book never existed, it's what's on screen you've got to draw something from? How do you thread that really delicate needle of all this information in your head from so many different versions?
To me, the movie is only what I see on the screen. And what I hear, of course, the score, the Mika Levy's score is such a huge part of it, and the production design, and it's that experience. And I don't think, when I watch it, I don't think about any of those things that I later learned. They're not there anymore. I mean, while I was watching it, while I was going back to watch it all those times, and after I'd read the book, I would see the little details and they would be interesting. But like, for example, in the scene where she's in the car, she gets in the car after the scene at the beach, and the car radio is on, and she hears the report of the people who were missing. And there's a scene in the book that has to do with a report, or a radio is on or something, and it reminded me of that. So I feel like these little details find their way into the movie, but I love the way the movie is its own entity that really, although it's inspired by the character in the book, it is so different from it. In some ways, it's the opposite. The film is, you were talking about, it's abstract. It's minimal in a way. It's very implicit. The book is very explicit, to a point where, it's really like, one of the book reviewers called it a vegan horror story. It's like all the things of how these men are captured and then basically turned into cattle. They're fattened up to 600 pounds. They're slaughtered and so on. And it is the most explicit thing you can imagine. That makes a whole other point. And Glazer left that behind and went in a completely other direction that is very intensely visual and cinematic. I mean, the book itself, had it been done literally, it would have been cinematic in an entirely different way. But this was more dreamlike, and it has that, he took that science fiction aspect of it, and it is so dreamlike, and the way he uses the red and the cinematography and so on. So it is, in that sense, it's the opposite of the book. It's less cerebral, more your senses.
Obviously, you mentioned as well, you profiled Scarlett Johansson, and it always seemed that she was destined for a role like this. For other big actors like herself, a role like Under the Skin sometimes happens as a one for them, one for the studio setup. But she's known as much for her indie movie work, sort of with like Ghost World, Lost in Translation, as she is for her Marvel movies. What was it like diving into this big Hollywood actress where there's so much information about her, and she's been really kind of well profiled since she was younger, compared to, say, Jonathan Glazer, who is a bit less kind of media averse?
I learned an awful lot about her. I'd seen a lot of her movies, but when I researched her career and watched a few more of her movies, what stood out, a couple of things really stood out for me. One is that she really had made an awful lot of very independent films, even though by the time I was writing in 2016, 17, she was already mainly known for the Marvel films and Black Widow. She was mainly known for that. But the truth is, she made Love Song for Bobby Long, and you mentioned Lost in Translation. She made Match Point, which is, another kind of a complete drama. And she had made all of these other films. And the other thing is that of her body of work, most of it is science fiction. She really does have, I mean, she did Ghost in the Shell, she did Her, the movie Her, and then she did Lucy, and then she did Under the Skin. They were all in a fairly short period of time. It was like, she's in this science fiction universe now. So she obviously has an affinity for it. And, Jeffrey O'Brien, one of the critics, said, this is the area she patrols, which I thought was a great way to put it. These post-human, quasi-human, superhuman. She's very good at it. There's something about her where she can inhabit that not quite human. She's got a real talent for it. So,
and I think you capture that in your book, that, as you were saying, the patrolling aspect, because she was hunting down this role. It wasn't that Jonathan Glazer and that weren't interested in this big celebrity style. I think it mentioned in your book that he was like, oh, I saw this person in a shop. I would like her to be it, which I found fascinating, because when I was reading that, I was like, this idea that Scarlett Johansson's like, it's this two-person thing with Brad Pitt. Yeah, I'm interested in it. And then it evolves into this one-person kind of role. Like, she is like, what's happened with that Jonathan Glazer script? Any news on it? She seemed to be so invested in that whole process. And yeah, she definitely was patrolling it and almost probably stalking down this kind of role.
She wanted the role. She, as it says in the book, she would ask her agent, what's happening with that Jonathan Glazer project? We haven't heard from him in a while. Give him a call. And as you said, he did not want a star at first. He did not want to, and there were casting sessions, and he was, places like CAA agencies, he was looking at actresses, but she was the one. The film that he liked her in, his favorite film of hers at that point, was Vicky Cristina Barcelona. He saw something in her in that film, and he said, I know she can do this. But even more than the film, he saw her in a music video. This I love. He saw her in a music video in which it's just a few minutes of her as a big star. She's playing a big celebrity herself, maybe a celebrity and being fawned over and getting into a limousine and going all this. And she has a face on for her fans, for the public. And then when all of that is gone, you see her other side, which is her as a human. And in that video, he saw that she could do this role. And you see how brilliant she is at that classic horror trope when she's chatting up those men in the car and she's all charming and she smiles and she makes them feel good. And then as soon as she drives on and they're behind, she becomes the classic horror film with that dull affect of the person who could kill you. Mm-hmm. And he saw that in that music video, and he was right. She did it. She could do it.
Absolutely. One of the elements I really loved about your book, and it played to something I've got a real niche interest in, and I find lacking in so many behind the scenes books and stories, is the selling of a movie and getting the budget. Was it a challenge to find those stories and almost put yourself in the room where it happened, where the deals are being done with Film 4, BFI, Creative Scotland for those, you know, what can be quite boring probably topics of like, we're going to give you this X amount of money, and you've made it a very interesting kind of journey of, as you touched on, it was talk of 40 million and like getting it down. How did you get yourself into those rooms and those stories and make it such an engaging element of the story, where to some people they might be like, oh, here's the money side of it all?
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you liked the chapter. And I have to credit my brother-in-law, Paul Schaefer, who works in finance. My sister Jackie and I were all out to dinner one night, and he said, "Are you going to have a chapter on raising the money?" And it hadn't occurred to me. And I said, that's a great idea because it's so important. Mm-hmm. So I started to look for people who would, and I got a lot of information about the money end from Nick Wexler, who was one of the producers on the film, along with James Wilson. Nick Wexler gave me a lot of insights into that transition of how they had the trouble raising the money at first, and they went to the lower budget. And also Alexander O'Neill, who ended up he was an associate producer. He was the one who did the second budget. And so he had a lot of anecdotes about the financials of it too. And I found it fascinating because I learned a lot about that side of movie making, which has, like you're saying, some people think of it's dry. I never had that much interest in it, but because I love the film so much, I was drawn into these details, and they were really interesting. And because there is a fight to get money to make a film, you have to hunt that money down. No one hands it to you. And this was not a mainstream movie, and they knew that from the beginning. I mean, at Claudia Blumhuber, once again at Silver Reel, they all knew it was a passion project. They loved Glazer, they loved his work, and they wanted to make a film with him. And they weren't expecting it. It was not going to be a Marvel movie. It was going to be this project that they all were passionate about. And so it was interesting to see how they had to struggle. They had to change the vision of the film, but they did finally raise the money they needed from 4 or 5 different places. And then they had a certain budget that they had to stay within, which meant, other restrictions, which, as you know, the restrictions are what make the movie better, because you have to discover new ways, and that becomes part of the magic of the film in the end.
What I found interesting as well with the Film 4 element is like they are, it's something we're quite proud of here and with sort of the British film community. And it was interesting to think about as well. Film 4 and A24 have crossed over several times. Films that are marketed by Film 4, financed by Film 4, have ended up being bought by A24 quite a few times. One is very much this UK indie kind of guy. The other one is this New York kind of company with sort of similar credibility. You think of films like Amy, Ex Machina, American Honey, Slow West, and The Lobster. What is it about these two organizations that cross over? What is it that they perhaps share that they seem to be kind of good bedfellows?
The film for vision, uh, and not just their vision, but it's their unique situation. They have the money because of the television it's their bank account that enables them to make films like Under the Skin. So it's beautiful. It works out for everyone. It works out for the mass audience for the television and all the things they love. And it works out for people like Glazer, who are able to benefit from the fact that they can finance projects like his. And A24, they're a beast. They just are they're so they are so open, and they are willing to work with new things and experimental things, and so many of their films. So I think that they are perfect together because they want to distribute the kinds of films that Film 4, because of their financial structure, is able to help make. So they're a great marriage.
The shoot of Under the Skin is so unique. And it's one of those things, like, even before I'd read your book, there's so many urban legends, almost myths about the film. Like, oh, that person's an actor, that person isn't. They had people in the back of the van, or that part was faked. All these sorts of things. There's so much chat about these undercover shoots, unknown actors, guerrilla filmmaking,
so much,
all these vans. And you've answered so many of those questions. Did you have like a little checklist in your head of like, I want to get to the bottom of this, I want to shine a light on this and highlight this filmmaking kind of technique? Did you have that very much at the start, or was that kind of something that you uncovered as you went through it?
I don't think those interviews that I did, they were a deluge of details and anecdotes. So I can't think I ever had a question that wasn't answered. And if anything, they came up with so many details they remembered that I would have had no idea. I mean, those stories about how in the opening sequence, when she descends the escalator into the mall, and how it was all covert filmmaking. They had somebody disguised as a janitor who was mopping up, and he had a camera, in his pail or a microphone. And then in the bar, in the club scene, they had a microphone in it. They invented this thing with a beer bottle that had a fake bottom. There was a microphone in there. I mean, the things they came up with for this covert filmmaking, cameras inside windows. When she did the fall on the street, there were people hiding. The miracle was that it never did happen, that they were totally exposed and a whole mob came and said, oh, there's Scarlett Johansson, they're shooting her, this is going on. It just didn't happen. And they were able to do those takes on the sidewalk, and the closest they came was at the club, when they thought that at one point somebody recognized her. They saw people taking out cameras and starting to photograph her. So they got her out of there. And as somebody in the crew pointed out, the thing about the club is that new people are always coming and going. Mm-hmm. So you can leave the club for an hour or two and go back later, and all of those people had moved on, and you have a whole new group of people in there that forgot that she was in there. So that was the closest they came to her being recognized, was in that club, because it was full of strangers who were just last week, Scotland.
That mall that you talk about, the Buchanan Galleries, I know. Yes. My co-host on this podcast, Dallas, he got his wife to be like, he used her sort of as like not a prop, but like he took they did their own photo kind of shoot of like, oh, this was the escalator Scarlett Johansson goes down, and I've been in that escalator so many times, and you take it for granted. There's times I'm going down it, we're like, oh yeah, I'm going down the Under the Skin kind of escalator and so on. It's been quite surreal. And like, it's been interesting as well, sort of the past year really, there's been a buzz about the talk of Under the Skin, a sort of a TV series. And obviously at one point, sort of A24, for example, were in the mix for the rights.
Yeah.
What do you think a sort of TV series would look like? Would it be something closer to the book, perhaps about that community, how that would all kind of work? And do you think it would be a potential struggle to come out of the shadow of this kind of one of the best films of the past kind of 10, 20 years?
I love that question. I think, I mean, if I were going to make a TV series of this, I think I would, in order to open it up, I would use the book. Um, I think you could use a lot of elements from the film as well, but I would go into the book in terms of the backstory on the aliens, what that whole industry is of them harvesting humans, who they were, these wolf-like creatures. I think you could do that and still use a lot of the elements that I love in the film that are beautiful. I think you could do both. And I think it would be fascinating to do that, to have the community. I think that's where, and then you have more characters. I think that'd be the way to go. I mean, I would be interested in watching that TV series. It'd be interesting.
Have you kind of ever visited Scotland, and which of the, if you haven't, which of these sort of under the skin locations would you be most keen to visit? The book has these wonderful hand-drawn maps that you designed.
I haven't visited Scotland. It was my plan to go, and you know what happened last year, just a couple of months after my book came out. So that plan had to be shelved, but I will go. Who knows when it will happen, maybe next year. And I will ask your partner on your podcast to give me that same tour of the Buchanan Galleries. And I would love to visit all those locations. And that town that where they ended up shooting the scenes in the third act, where she meets the character known as Quiet, and he brings her home. I'd love to see that little town. I'd like to see every location. It would be a real thrill.
Even though I live in the set of Under the Skin, essentially, it's little things. For example, like the football fan. Obviously, the football game takes place in Glasgow at Celtic Park, but it is a Hibernian fan that gets kidnapped. That is my local football team to where I live, and their ground is literally right next to my office.
Oh wow!
And all these little things, and like the nightclub is 15 minutes down the M8. And I have to give full credit to you for your mapping skills. Like, so many Americans absolutely butcher, locations. Even things like Trainspotting 2, shot in Edinburgh, the geography makes no sense. So you've got full marks from this geography fan here of capturing Scotland. So well done. And
I'm so glad.
I'm still trying to visit some of the locations. Last year, I don't have a car, but I can drive, and I'm determined to visit the beach from the Crying Baby. I've always wanted to visit that. And even last year, I was like to a girl I was having some dates with. I was like, do you want to visit this beach? Like, it would never happen in the end, but like, it's definitely on my list of places to visit. It's so incredible to see your country captured on screen like that.
Oh, that really is beautiful. And they did find some amazing locations. Eugene Strange was the location manager, and he spent a whole summer with his wife touring all over Scotland, which was a great pleasure for them. And they found these places. They found Auchmithie, that beach. They were planning to use a beach in another area. That was not the area they originally looked at. But when
John the West Coast originally, wasn't it?
That's right. You're right. But when John saw those cliffs, and the cliffs, one of the things that is captivating to me about that sequence is those jagged cliffs are so menacing, like giant jaws or teeth, or they just by being there in the background, they add so much to the menace of the beach, so much so than if it had been just a calm sandy beach somewhere. So it was a beautiful location. And all the locations, I mean, yeah, it would be great to see them. Very good.
I love that the element of the film where it's not just about the actors, even the weather and locations play such a key role. But do you think it could have been anywhere else that they shot this film? Could you have imagined something like an Under the Skin in Utah or Oregon or, Canada potentially? Could you imagine it anywhere else?
It's hard for me to imagine it. And I can tell you that Jonathan Glazer was asked that question, and he said he never considered anywhere but Scotland for shooting it. He would never, that was the place. It's hard to imagine, seeing the film now, it's hard for me to imagine also any place else. And you mentioned the stadium, and a lot of very careful organizing and research went into that, because they had to time it right when the stadium was open, when the game was being played, just at that moment, as you know, when the crowd is gushing out onto the street, so she could maneuver the van around into the crowd and be surrounded by what Glazer said was, we're surrounded by prey, her prey. And when you see her so confidently maneuvering in that van, the people are right outside the van. It's such a chilling moment, because you think, these are the people she is hunting. It was quite a great scene.
By the time you got to the end of this project, how many times do you think you watched and read the book and the film in that time?
Oh, I think I had seen the film, I had watched the entire film probably a dozen times, but I had watched individual scenes countless times, because I was looking for details, or sometimes in an interview, someone would say, oh, do you remember that like Johnny Byrne did the sound? And it was a wonderful interview with Johnny Byrne at Wave Studios, and how he said, when I was recording sounds, I used one of them in the scene where after she leaves the city, she's in the country and she's walking along the road. And that beautiful John Ford-like shot, she's walking along the road. And at some point she stops and she looks around, and you hear some music, and you hear a bird. And those were sounds he had recorded. One of them he recorded when he was visiting his dad. And it's beautiful the way all these people bring to bear, all their talents, and all the unique things they have to offer. The crew is just so wonderful. I really think it was a labor of love for everyone. The people who worked on all the technical things, when they got to the point of working in the studio, it's beautiful stuff.
Obviously, your project's now out there in the world. Your book's out there now in the world. What's been the reaction from fans of the film, the book, and perhaps the people involved in the project to your compiling of this incredible oral history of this sort of still underseen and under-discussed film?
The most beautiful thing for me has been discovering fans of the film, discovering them on Twitter, which is how you and I met on social media. I mean, people will come out of nowhere from all over the world and say, I loved this movie, and I'm so glad you wrote about it, and I want to read all about how it was made. And it really is so heartening to be able to connect with these fans and hear what they loved about it and hear them talk about it. Because, in the 5 years I was working on it, I'm in a bubble. That's what writing is. I mean, I did my interviews, but for the most part, I'm in a bubble. I interviewed a few people in person. I interviewed Paul Watts, who's the editor. He's right there in Soho in London. I interviewed him in person and a few other people, but most of my interviews were, like this, or they were on the phone. And so to meet the fans of the film has been just the most thrilling thing of all. I mean, it's and to connect with their experience, like mine, of sitting in the theater and feeling like I have never seen anything like this in my life of going to the movies. I have never experienced anything like this. And that's what you hear more than anything else. It's beautiful.
How do you follow it up? What's next potentially for you? Have you got a film in mind that you might not be able to talk about at this stage, but have you got something in mind that you're keen to tackle next?
I've started my new book. And this book it's also a film book. It's part film book and part things in my life that I want to write about. It's the convergence of the two. And I'm talking in this book about a great many films that I love, a great many films that have really touched me over the years. Another film that I love, which I mentioned because it is minimalist in some ways, like Jonathan Glazer's movie. It's Sofia Coppola's film Somewhere, from about 2008 or so. Interested. I felt like when I saw that, I felt like I'd never seen a film like that before. And I am drawn to these films that are, Somewhere is like a poem. It just gives you enough, and then all the cinematic elements just wash over you. As you know, you've seen it, the music, the cinematography. And so all these films that I've cherished, I hope to talk about them all in the book.
It's probably the only Coppola film that I've watched once. And I don't know why it never maybe clicked with me, but maybe I'll need to give myself a second go around with that. I mean, we were really lucky recently. We had 3 guests from her recent film On the Rocks, and we've had a guest from The Bling Ring, and all have had nothing but lovely things to say about what it's like to work with Sophia and her work on that. So it's always a relief when you hear like, going, oh, that person's good. They're in the good books. They're not a tyrant or a terrible director. So
they love her. They love her. And I read an interview with Stephen Dorff, who's the star of Somewhere, along with Elle Fanning. And he was talking about when he first saw the script. He said the script was like 30 pages long. He said the rest of it was in her head. You don't really even know what you're getting into. But that's the poetry of that movie. It all came to be because she visioned it in her head, and she put it on the screen. It's beautiful.
Talking of Glazer, his next film, the Zone of Interest, that's another book adaptation. Yes. It's about a Nazi officer who becomes enamored with a camp commandant's wife. So this one will be released by A24, but will also they're paying for it this time. I imagine you're looking forward to. And have you read this book ahead of the film? And have you got any ideas about how Jonathan might tackle this one, or are you going to go for the film first, then for the book again?
Definitely the latter. I will see the film first and then read the book, because if history has taught us anything, it's that Jonathan Glazer will take that book in another direction. And so I'd like to see what he does and then read the book. I think that what he talks about in terms of focusing not so much on the Nazis or the victims of the Holocaust, but it's a third thing, which is the surrounding people in the country, as he calls them, the bystanders. I think you'll be a unique film, and it's historical. I think his first film that's that kind of thing. And I'm very interested to see. I know they were going to shoot in Poland in last November. It got pushed because of COVID. But so hopefully they'll be shooting this year sometime, and maybe we'll see the film next year. But I do look forward to it.
In America, this was one of the first sort of films A24 picked up to distribute. What do you think attracted them quite early doors to Under the Skin, to think that, I suppose it's interesting at that time, it kind of falls in with like your Spring Breakers, your Bling Rings, very interesting kind of films. Do you feel that they viewed sort of Under the Skin as being a statement film that would match their kind of what they were hoping to market themselves as quite early doors.
Yes, I think they knew. I think they knew that if you take Jonathan Glazer, look at what he did in his first two movies. He made a heist movie that is like no other heist movie. He takes the genre and makes it his own. He makes it it's a heist movie, but it's a Glazer heist movie. And with Birth, spectacular, another sort of mystical movie that takes a story and puts you in a zone. You know, you go into another world with him. I love that film, and I think they knew. I think they took it to the bank, so to speak, that he was going to take this wonderful novel and make it a first, a one of a kind, a groundbreaking film in practically every way. So yeah, they know, they have the radar. They have the A24 radar. They know what they want.
And what do you think of them as sort of a brand, and what are potentially some of the other highlights of their filmography for yourself?
I'm gonna have trouble coming up with A24 movies off the top of my head that I love, but there's so many. You mentioned Spring Breakers. Again, who could even envision a film like that before it was made? It was, I hate to say the word groundbreaking, but you've never seen anything like it. It's like the response I get from fans when they see Under the Skin. I never saw anything like it. I never saw anything like Spring Breakers. And that's A24's, that's a gift, to come up with these films that you will never forget, because you've never seen anything like them, and you could never have predicted seeing anything like them. So, they're an amazing company.
For people that have obviously listened to this, if they've not read the book already, they're clearly going to be sold on it. Where's the best kind of place to find your book, to buy it? Where's the best place that puts the money sort of in the author's pocket best?
Oh gosh, go to your local bookshop and order it. Maybe they have it. If they don't, just order it through them. Then we support our local bookstores and keep them, in business, because a lot of them were hit very hard in 2020. Some of our local shops here closed. I'm sure that's the case with you too, where you are. And that's what I would say. Go to the local bookstore, give them a chance to order it. They'll order it. And that's the best way to support authors in general. It's the best way to support bookshops. It doesn't matter what size the bookstore is, they still need your support. When I was in London a few years ago to interview Paul Watts, I had a few amazing days at Waterstones down in Piccadilly there, and a big store, but it has every bit of the charm of every small bookstore I've ever been in. I don't know how they managed to do that, but it's a wonderful store. So yes, local bookshop.
And
thank you.
Where's the best place to keep up to date with your news, posts, anything about kind of work that you're up to next? Where's the best place for people to follow you and kind of keep up to date?
Twitter. My Twitter handle is, I think it's Alien in Mirror without the, but I'm on Twitter, and I post about a lot of films on Twitter. I love talking about movies on Twitter. I also post about books and art. And I've been reading Raymond Chandler. I've been posting a lot about Raymond Chandler's noir books lately. They didn't call it noir, but detective novels. And so yes, Twitter is the place. And to a lesser degree, the other social media, but that's the one where I spend a lot of time. And I love hearing from people who love Under the Skin and A24 movies in general, and Film 4 also, all the connections.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk about. As I say, it's one of our favorite films on this podcast. It's still number one after all these things. So I loved just being able to dive into crack the mystery of Under the Skin. As I say, I was a bit nervous going in. I was like, what happens is going to take away some of the charm and mystery of the film, but it really enhanced it when I revisited.
I'm so glad to hear it.
So yeah, thank you so much. And whenever you're in Scotland, be sure to give us a shout, and we'll visit some of these little spots with you.
I look forward to it.
West Lothian. That's no other American can enjoy that as much as you, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Lee.